Hello, everyone, and welcome to Houston Techfest 2020, the virtual edition. Before we get started, I wanted to make you aware of a feature of the presentation that'll make this session more interactive. Please make note of the question mark icon on your presenter screen. Clicking the icon will open the question mark and answer feature, which will allow you to send the moderator questions to be delivered to our presenter at the appropriate time. We do plan to allow breaks during the session to ask questions, so please be ready if you think of any. We are also very excited to let you know that CodeMag is giving everyone a free subscription. You should receive a follow-up email from Houston Tech Fest with directions on how to take advantage of that. And with that, we are proud to present Daniel Scheifler, Senior Consultant at Improving, who will be sharing how to own your career. Daniel, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nat. Good afternoon. Thank you guys for taking the opportunity to come and join us for virtual Houston Tech Fest. Welcome to my study. I'm hoping to talk today a little bit about my experience in what it looks like to truly own your career, to take over that thing which we spend so much of our lives in and truly make it your own. Now, I like to start with structures of my presentation. I will be covering some things which I have called misconceptions that I have found and had to tackle myself while trying to grapple with this thing I called a career, and the mental models that I now use instead. I'll talk about one of those mental models in particular, which I refer to the stages for do, know, and grow, and how they change the way you will be growing and improving inside the ownership of your career. And lastly, I want to leave you off with a couple of small tools that you can hopefully take away today and immediately start to apply to your network, to your growth for your own career, in ways that will be meaningful and impactful to you. And then I will talk a little bit about my observations, as this is still a subject I'm still learning on. And every position I take, every person I interact with, I learn a little bit more. Now, I do want to sweeten the pot a little bit. Please stay tuned through the whole presentation, and especially to the end, as I'll be giving away free copies of a book called The Power of Who, which I do reference in the presentation. I believe it is a very useful tool and something I would like to share with our community at large. There will be some instructions for how to request a copy. I only have so many at the end of the presentation. Now, as Nat kindly mentioned, we are going to be able to take some questions here. I have two built-in sections, one towards the middle and one towards the end, to handle these questions. When you see that little banner up at the upper right-hand corner of your screen, the Ask Your Questions Now, I'll be about 2 or 3 slides away from being able to start answering those questions. Now, before I go and keep on rambling, who am I? As Nat mentioned, my name is Daniel Scheifler. I'm a Christian, husband, and father in order of importance. And most recently, I'm an improver. I have made it my goal to look very seriously at the choices I've made in my life, as well as in my work, and actually see what's there, to see with eyes unclouded, as opposed to just being under my own impressions or just going the way it always went. I want to see the truth. And I have found that this area, the own your career, has been one where lots of fruit has come from a lot of introspection. But let me tell you a little bit more about improving. It is the single best place I have ever worked. And it's not just because we're really good at what we do. We care. Improving's goal has not merely been to be an excellent consulting company, and we are, but it has been to change the perception of the IT professional from one where you have to spend a bunch of money on this person who speaks magic to a black box and hope it works, to being one as a trusted partner who takes business to that next step and truly delivers that thing that is the next generation of value. Now, as we are part of this community, we offer some pretty stellar training. Master Don McGreal and his crew have completely converted our curriculum and done a staggering job, now delivering in virtual courses. At the end of this month, we have the Professional Scrum Master course, or the PSM2, like right after that. These are courses set up to prepare for your 2-day certification. Your certification as a Scrum Master, pouring back into you and hopefully into the teams you represent. Now, if you're more interested in the business side of that, at the end of October, we have the Professional Scrum Product Owner course, which again, helps to show you how to leverage Scrum to maximize the value of the products and the services that are being provided. We're running a special deal today. If you use Tech-Fest-2020, you can take $500 off the top list price of all of the courses below. If you're interested, please check out improving.com/training. Now, since we're talking about a careers course, I thought it would be very good to share that we're hiring. Do you know a guy who works in Java? Maybe you're one who works in the front end. Maybe you do React or Angular. We need all of it. We need senior full stack engineers. We need juniors educated in the Microsoft stack and Angular 2. We need senior engineers with strong SQL background. We need people who are flexible in their front end with whether it's React or Angular, and we would love to get to know you. Send your resumes to careers@improving.com. And by the way, since this is a virtual conference, it doesn't just have to be in Houston. Did we mention we've got 14 offices? We are truly a North American company. We have offices all the way up in Canada and Calgary, down to Guadalajara, Mexico, and we've got 2 in Dallas. We've got, of course, I represent the Houston office, which I happen to be rather biased towards, but there's a chance that the person you know who's looking for work, or even you, live nearer to an improving office than you know. Send us a resume, come chat with us. We would love to get to know you. Now, we don't want to just leave you there. We want to leave you with something better. So throughout all of this time, we have been running a free Lunch and Learn series on Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you're interested in the future events, you can check them out at improving.com/virtual-events. We have all of the old recordings, whether it was talking about how to work effectively remotely, or how to do remote Scrum Mastery, which is its own ballpark, or even how to run effective meetings by yours truly. All of those are available for your use. We truly want to give back to the community and make it better for our time now spent able to join on each other remotely. Now, with that, let's transition back to talking specifically about careers, and hopefully yours. I want to cover a couple of the misconceptions I personally exited like high school and college with as I started into the real world, and trying to figure out what it looks like to make your way in all the crazy wonderfulness that is the computer science industry and others. So, how do you build a career, right? I mean, I remember originally thinking, it kind of just happens, right? Like, I'm working, therefore I have a career. I mean, sort of. I mean, you're definitely got a job. But what's the difference then between a career and just another job? How is it that some people seem to be actively and deeply engaged in the work they're doing, and here I am kind of going through the motions? What was different? And particularly, how could it be that they enjoyed themselves so much? Because I wanted that. And as I dug deep, I realized that there were really 2 answers to this. You build a career intentionally. It doesn't just fall into your lap, and you can't wait for someone else to give it to you. I made that second mistake pretty badly when I first started. And so you have to be intentional in the steps you take, in the kind of work you produce, in just about everything that is inherent in a career. You need to have intentionality behind it. You cannot just coast through, which kind of couples really nicely with the second. Now that is a Ford Model T. It can come in any color as long as it's black. And the reason why I use this for service is I think Ford, in some of his own autobiography, describes this thought really, really well. The key thing that drives business, the key thing that drives a product is the service. It's not the fancy marketing. It's not the trumping up of anything else. It's not even necessarily right time, right place. It is always down to, did you deliver a meaningful service to someone else? Now that idea of service is kind of fundamental to how I've come to understand my career. After all, right? A career is what? Is basically a long series of jobs. It's how I choose to spend a third of my life, the 8 hours a day that I'm working, doing something. It is the way in which I do that something, and it is kind of the attitude I take to doing it. Now, with service, you should start noticing a slight difference in the standard way we approach it, right? Normally, I could ask you, are you an employee? And the answer might be, yeah, I work for such and such company. I work for Improving. Well, that's mostly true. But if I start thinking about my career as being built on the services that I am providing, I recognize a couple of things. One, I may be employed by my company, but they're employing me for a certain reason, right? They don't hire fools. They don't just hire butt warmers. They hire people to do work. And there's a very particular kind of work that my skill set creates a space for me. This understanding of service coupled with the understanding of why would your employer hire you leads to several changes. One, are you making a better contribution for what you do to your employer than the paycheck you get? I'll be honest, because you have to make a profit as an employer, the answer has to be yes, right? There's nothing bad in that, it's business. We need them to have a profit to continue to run the engine. In that, it now changes some of what I'm looking at, right? So really quick, let's play pretend. Today you have signed an employment contract, maybe with your employer, whoever that happens to be. But let's switch that a little bit. How would you be different if at that time, instead, you signed a contract? You were a contractor as opposed to an employee. What would be different? Well, I mean, for example, the major difference I've seen between employees and contractors is employees get health care. Contractors usually have to go buy their own insurance, right? And that's a pretty significant difference. But I've also seen contractors tend to have bigger paychecks. They have a little bit better control. They do work and then charge their client for the work they've done. How's that different than you do when you log your hours at the end of a week? Because, I mean, honestly, all employers will want to know, like, hey, what were you here? When were you here? What were you working on? And this gives rise to a very powerful idea. You've been employed, self-employed, since day one. Your services to your employer are literally the services of corporation you to your client, the employer. You have signed an employment contract agreeing to trade so much of your time, therefore the time and work of you corp, to your employer for a fixed value. Maybe it's your salary, maybe it's your vacation time, maybe it's your salary, your vacation time, and insurance. But you've been employed by your choices as you corp since the first day. But this idea presents new and very powerful ways to interact with your career. What's a resume if you are an individual corporation? Oh, well, that's easy. It's marketing materials for corporation you. Okay. Are your marketing materials written in a language that your clients will understand? Because let's be honest, resumes are a bit of a pain to read. I went to do this at such and such a date and such a time with this position, and I dynamically set up the thing to do the awesomeness or whatever, and it's just dry. So that's not really what your employer cares about necessarily, is it? There is some need they have, some service they desire, and they want to see if you're going to be a good fit. Okay, that makes sense. Maybe that they're interested in is how much of an ROI do I get on you when you get hired? Oh, well, I managed to write some automation that got the team of 6 I was working on to do the work of a team of 9, saving the company on average about $300,000 for about 2 weeks worth of work. That's slightly different. But down to the boils of it, you are a corporation of yourself. You have signed an employment contract to agree to give so much of a service to someone for a fixed value. You can negotiate this when you sit down at the table. You are effectively CEO of Corporation U. Congratulations on the promotion. It comes with a ton of freedom and a ton of terror. That's okay. But it allows you to realize that you have the choice to literally lean into it and own your choices in where you work, who you work for, and the kind of work you produce. So remember that owning your career is going to be both scary and also liberating. It requires a shift in your thinking to do it well. So let's talk about this idea of a career then. If you are U Corporation, what does a career look like? We've all heard that wonderful metaphor of the career ladder. I hate it. I particularly dislike this metaphor because it implies that it's just a series of rungs stood up against a wall and you're hoping you stood it up against the right wall and that you can be strong enough to get to the top. And of course, we all think that the ladder narrows to the top because there's only so many of the top positions, and that it's really built on a series of promotions, each taken as a single step going upwards, upwards, upwards. But that model doesn't fit everything I've seen. I've worked with mathematicians, I've worked with philosophers, I have worked with a tax accountant and a massage therapist, all of them in doing software development. How did that fit their career ladder? Best answer I got is it doesn't. It actually doesn't account for how one field can move into another, or even how if I get tired of doing software development, might shift into something more valuable to me. And so this leads us to one of the questions you have to answer as being CEO of Corporation U. What do you want? Where do you want to be? What kind of company do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? And so I want to offer a better model than a career ladder to talk about your career. If you consider rock wall, you kind of start at one spot in the bottom and you go up a little bit. And most of the time when we start on a rock wall, it's pretty straightforward. We just go straight up for a little bit and then we get to this hard spot. We can't quite reach the next rung on the ladder here. But you know, that one over there looks kind of interesting. So instead of reaching up, I reach over and I kind of pull myself along. And I can kind of transition both vertically and laterally across this wall until I find the path for me that was the most valuable. So I want you to think about that. When you look at a career, it's not always about direct vertical moves. Certainly, that's how it's going to start, and a lot of progress gets made at the beginning. But then it can kind of feel like it stalls out when you get to this doldrums in the middle of, well, it's taking longer and longer to get that next promotion. What do I do? No. If it's a rock wall, maybe look laterally. If you're not happy with your work, consider that. Now, with all that has been happening right now, I understand that talking about it as though you had a job right now may not cover everybody. So I do want to take some time to talk about losing a job. But I don't want you to think that's really what I'm going to talk about. I want you to think and focus instead on this. What did you get back? Now, when I was in college, my father, being very kind of recognizing I would need it, sent me to a group called Between Jobs Ministries out in Spring. It was a group of people all focused on helping each other get that next rung in the career and overcome the gap that is being between jobs. Because it's really easy to get lost if you're not careful there. Now, this was fairly regimented. You'd have, resume writing sessions or interview practices, and these were all great. But the first day, they would always have the newcomers go to one very particular session given by the pastor who was kind of in charge of running Between Jobs Ministries. And he would sit you down and talk to you about what it's like losing a job. And he talked about that initial sudden exposed feeling you'd have. Because we, especially in America, have the tendency to say, oh, so, who are you? And they answer, oh, I'm a software engineer, which is what we do, but not who we are. We are very deeply tied to what we do as part of our identity. And so all of a sudden, losing a job hurts. It feels like going out naked in the cold. Worse, there's that immediate next thought of, oh gosh, how am I going to take care of my family? How am I going to pay my bills? And these worries start piling on. And of course, the natural reaction for anyone with any ounce of initiative is, I'm going to go start looking for a job today. Good, keep that up. But that can also lead into a bad pattern because some people say, oh, now that you've lost your job, your full-time job is getting the next one. And so we'll sit at the computer and type out a bunch of applications and send them on to the void. Where'd it go? We get no answer. And so we do it again and again, day in and day out, until eventually we wake up and it's 3 weeks later and we finally go outside and, it doesn't feel like it's good because your spouse has been asking, hey, any progress on that job search? Or maybe your friend is calling you, hey, how are you doing, buddy? How's that job search going? Or now you go out and the neighbor is picking up his newspaper and say, hey, how's that job search going? And it feels like another hammer blow on your head saying, you're not good enough because you don't have that career yet. That sucks. That's all about the story you tell yourself. Why are these people asking this question? These people are the ones close to you, the ones who are rooting for your victory in all of this going on. They're not asking you to remind you you're not good enough. They're saying, I can't wait to celebrate with you because I know you're going to get it and I'm excited for it. And because we tend to tell ourselves these stories that aren't so useful, we forget to look at the thing that has been put back into our hands. What do I trade when I get a job? Oh, I trade the choice of what I do with 8 hours of my life, for the most part, every day, 5 days a week, 5 days a week. When that happens, and I no longer have the employment, I get those 8 hours back. I don't even have to go through the traffic anymore. Now, that's less relevant now. That was 2 hours of my life every day I get back all of a sudden. That's fantastic. But if I don't spend it well, am I using my life well? I've only got one. And you can't choose to hoard the moments. You have to spend them as you get them. And if I spend all 10 of those hours now huddled up in my office, kind of closing the windows, trying to wait and hope I can get called back as I send these applications out into the dark, I forget that there's a world out there. In fact, I probably forgot it while I was working my job. And so he recommended and encouraged, take that time. Yes, go and continue to apply for things. That's the right and intelligent way to spend your time as U Corporation. But spend some of it on you. Go and sharpen a skill. Go and do something to be outside with people. Go and, I don't know, mow your lawn. Take care of your house. Do these things that you were too tired to do in the afternoon after getting home from an 8-hour day of work and 2 hours of traffic. And now realize that when you get to those evening hours, you feel refreshed and alive because you actually got to do something productive. And then reach out to the people who matter most to you. Those 10 people you would say, I would call this person on a bad day and know they would talk to me. And like, you know, maybe that couple who just had a kid and haven't had a date night in 6 months, go babysit. You got the energy for it. Use your life, use your time to go and love on somebody else. Because at the end of the day, it will make that time you're without a job go by like, it'll just be gone. It's not that it's going to disappear, but you're going to feel like you're spending your life on something more valuable. And you're right. Spend time with your kids. Spend time with your wife. Do that thing you haven't had the time to do. Don't necessarily go crazy and spend a bunch of money you don't have. That's okay. It is okay and intelligent to be wise. But spend that resource you suddenly have more of than you used to in ways intentionally. And watch how that investment in your network, in people, opens doors for you you never thought were possible. So with that encouragement, I do want to open the floor now to some questions.
Yeah, we do have some questions, Daniel. How is building a career on service or intent different? Do you need a master plan?
Okay, so I can answer that second one really easy. No, you don't need a master plan. However, I've found it is very important to have a goal. What do you want? Do you want to be happy? Or do you want something different out of your career? Like maybe you really have that vision for owning a company. Great. What's between here and there? The difference in having a career built on service or intent is the choices and the way in which you go about your daily work. A career built on service, you're now no longer focusing on just get the task done, but making certain that the task was done in the right way for the person who's asking for it. Going maybe that little step beyond or asking the why a couple steps deeper so that you can deliver not merely a service, but value. The intent comes down to maybe how you choose the jobs you take or the attitude you come at particularly hard tasks or worse, boring ones in your work. My best example on this is if you're coming at it with intent, I automated the boring stuff to literally, and I quote, automate myself out of a job because either my employer would find new work for me because I was doing good work or I'd gain a new skill. And I told them this and they were like, yeah, that's okay. But it's that conversation, that intentionality to handle the stuff that's not so fun that is the difference I've noticed.
Thank you. So we do have a question from the audience. How do you repair a career? Building is easy, but it's difficult to get back lost time.
Yeah, getting back lost time can seem unsurmountable. Here is what I have observed makes the biggest differences in your career. What you do. I have gotten a job for things I did completely outside my work more often than I have specifically for my experience. Sometimes that means having an honest conversation and drawing attention to the fact that there was a gap. Maybe it's about the story you tell about the gap. Is it a victim story saying, well, this happened to me and I couldn't help but? Or is it, this is the challenge life has thrown at me and here's the way I'm choosing to address it? Because those two things have very different perspectives to an employer. And honestly, if you're fighting so much with having to repair it, build a new one. not literally tear it down and build on nothing, but use the experience you've got. Go and build something new and unique. Take away the lessons you've learned and build something that only you could build from it. Maybe go write a blog or something. And it happens to be a relatively cheap way to get started. And it is a constant way to try and produce value for the community at large. And I think that's the real key to it. Don't simply withdraw into yourself, realizing that you messed up. Turn back outward. Pour value from what you have learned from who you are back into others.
Awesome. Thank you. So last question. What change did you make when you realized you were self-employed?
Okay. So this one kind of struck me silly when I was kind of reaching a doldrums in my first position. And it changed the way I interacted with my daily work. I was much more willing to take on challenges that I didn't really like. It didn't sound like fun, but it sounded like it would be good experience. And I was more willing to make that trade. Moreover, though, I started taking a very serious look at the direction I thought the industry was going. At the time, I had only had experience in desktop web development and in C++ and C#. And I looked ahead and I realized, oh, this is all going online. There's no way those skills will continue to be as marketable as I want them to be as I do that. So I started looking very serious at the skills gap I had and looking honestly and saying, I'm not good enough for the future I want. How do I get there? And so I invested very heavily into things like Pluralsight and spent a lot of times doing hobby projects, learning different random languages specifically to get better.
And attending events like Houston Techfest.
Yes, shameless plug.
Awesome. That was the last question we have for now.
Excellent. So now let's move on to one of the models I have used to kind of think about the work I was in. The answer to the question I just gave actually really focused on this first stage. Now, being a model, they're not perfect one-to-one, but they're intended to provide a grouping of things that you can kind of understand how to interact with them from the name. The first stage is do. Now, by stage, I really mean the moment in your career where your primary value is derived from, in our case, this stage is derived, its primary value for why people hire you is for what you can do for them or do with the knowledge you have. And here, growth really looks like gathering new tools, learning how to use them in novel fashion, making certain you have the right language to talk about the tools you have. It talks about not merely a collection of a bunch of things you're familiar with, but really looking at the kind of services that you corporation can offer and figuring out they're the right mix for the career you want to build. It talks about being valued for being effective as an individual contributor primarily, because your value is primarily what happens when I put you with hands to keyboard or you with an Excel sheet or whatever other tools we happen to use nowadays, and how effective you are at delivering the value I want doing that. But in the do stage, you're not merely developing the material for a do career, because no one wants to stay as correction. From the most part, from when I talk to people, they don't just want to stay as an individual contributor. And so you start developing additional skills in this next phase, which I will call know. This is primarily valued for what you know, not what you know how to do, but what you actually know. And here, you kind of develop both do and know starting at the same moment. As you learn how to do something with C#, you begin to have a little bit of knowledge about not only your project and how it's being used here, but of some of the idiosyncrasies in C#. And as you grow and develop from being, say, a junior to a developer to a senior developer, you'll start gradually becoming the person people go to for more and more of this knowledge value. For me, what this looked like, I had joined a team where I didn't know React. So I was very much in the do category. I had to learn it as I was going and then eventually got valued because I could deliver code and therefore functions through React effectively. As I continued to gain experience, I learned aspects of the design and the shortcomings and the idiosyncrasies of React and how it impacted the delivery of the value of the project we wanted. And I was able to make recommendations. Now, I didn't start having that be my everyday task or every day this is what I get. But as I got better and better at this and knew deeper and deeper the designs and the available other products inside of our category, and the team grew around me, it became very common that the first portion of a given sprint, I would spend the first day or two in a room with a whiteboard, with a marker, and a bunch of people talking through the designs so that we could deliver them quickly, effectively, and actually have them working at the end. This might look different depending upon the kind of career you're building, but the core component boils down to you will still be doing as your primary work, but people will continue to come to you as the senior team member, asking more and more questions about the kind of work we're doing, about the policies of the company and why they're that way, or how to deal with a particularly ornery client. And this no phase, you kind of shift from being just doer, but you start being a real valuable asset to the team because you can help other people do more effectively. Which leads us very interestingly into this next phase. As you kind of develop this no category, there will eventually come those moments where you can coach someone in doing something you know how to do well. And as that continues, especially for say like a good team lead, we'll definitely be operating in the no category. And then we'll have a lot of this next, which is to grow others. Their goal is not just to write code and deliver it themselves, but to grow and groom and prepare their team and their teammates to do better. A very good way to say this is that their goal is to replace themselves by growing someone who is so good at leading others that I need to move into another role because it's time for them to have it. Your goal in this stage goes from merely being the one whose knowledge is sought to being the one who's now pouring back into people and who people would rather have you spend your time doing that than to just do code. And so you have to trade out a little of the do in order to gain the time to go and to grow. Now, it is expected you're probably going to be delivering in all three of these categories at the same moment. But the ways in which you grow in each of them is a little different. I mentioned for do, it's about acquiring new tools. And no, it's for acquiring knowledge about the application of the tools, for example, or even just source knowledge of why our application, our work goes in this way about the processes. To grow in the growth stage, you're going to be branching out from whatever discipline you have into leadership, into business, into a bunch of different areas that I would generally label as soft skills. That's the primary way you start to build your career, by gathering better skills on offer in particular areas that are completely different than just your core delivery of value. And it feels like a little bit of a risk at this time. But during the no phase, you can totally spend the time reading a good book, say like How to Lead When You're Not in Charge by Clay Scroggins, to start really developing the potential for being able to pour into others and to grow them into the team members that they want to be and who the organization will be able to best interact with in the future. Now, with all of this, I do want to take the time now to shift gears a little and talk about, okay, so we talked about, here are the misconceptions and here's a useful model for talking about where you are in a given career step. But what does that look like? And I mentioned in some of the answers to questions I had in the past that you should start with why. Now, I like to recommend the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, because it's not merely about how leaders go and lead companies. Because remember, being the CEO of U Corporation means you're the leader of you. So getting skills in that department pays dividends even if you're not actually leading others at your work. But you need to know why you're actually doing all of this to really understand how to build the career you want to live in. Remember, you're spending a third or more of your life every day doing this thing. Don't let it just be a thing you do to make money. Let it be something that is more life-giving than that. So start with your goal. Do you want to be happy? This is not a bad goal. It's perfectly fine to have a career where you're happy. It may, in fact, make some very, very hard decisions about whether or not you take that promotion very, very easy. Do you want instead to do challenging work with interesting people in a place you love to live? Okay, that definitely changes the kind of work you're going to take. That interesting place, for example, might very well tell you you do not take the job that goes to Alaska if you're not interested in snow. Why is it that you're doing what you do? And with it, Take that concept for being U Corporation again, for being self-employed. How do you want U Corporation to be known? What kind of experience do you want your clients to have with you? And why do you want them to have that? Why is that of value to you? And all of this will, of course, be very subjective. So it will take some time and introspection. But I encourage you, invest in some good books, learn from what those authors are trying to share with you, and then make your own choices. Because it really is down to the end. You're going to have to live in this house you build. And I want to help you build that mansion you're dreaming of, that it has everything you want as much as we can. Because if you choose to take ownership of it, then it is on you then, and it is in your hands to build the career you desire. I'm not saying that we're going to, go and create the job openings that you want, but we can find ways to turn the jobs that you believe are best fit for your skills and what you want to offer as a service, and then lever into the relationships you'll need to build, about the skills you want to build, into this now, why do you serve? For my part, I have it in me a desire to create or to build up a company that exists primarily as a means to serve its employees. I walked around too many times in companies that use their employees, especially their software developers, to deliver code. And it kind of was demeaning to the human element I saw in this. I don't want that to be the company I build. I want to build it in such a way that it can serve its employees as a primary interest while delivering excellent, good things to our clients, because that's how business has to run. It has to make profit so it can serve people. And I want that to be the focus, the service to people. Now, of course, once you have this, you have a goal, but you have no path to get there. So I'm going to recommend, as far as finding the path, a book called The Power of Who. Now, Bob Bodine, the author here, talks a lot about the power that's wrapped up in the existing network you already have. You already know every person you need to know. Those 140 closest relationships that you have are enough to get you linked into the career you want to have. Now, I can by no means do justice to what the author talks about in there, but I want to recommend, because once you know where you're going, the next step is finding out who's there with you. Who are your 12 closest friends? Who are those 3 who are your best friends? Who's that one who is truly your best, closest friend, the one that will stick closer than a brother? Find out who those are and invest in those relationships, because they're the ones who are the ones rooting for you when you're without a job and rooting for you when you get that promotion. And these are the people who will go out on a limb to try and help you find that next step as best they can. Now, with all this in mind, it's not enough just to say who. You also kind of want to ask about what. Make a list of the kind of places you would want to work, the kind of work that you find most engaging. For me, I recognized when I was taking the first steps in career that I had originally gone to pursue engineering because I enjoyed the hard problems, and I was pretty good at math and science. As I got better and deeper into it, I realized I would really like to do robotics because I had a penchant for the way you solve the problems with the code by moving the bot. I found that enjoyable. Mind you, when I got out, I realized there were basically no robotics jobs, so I went to the next closest cousin, which was software development. And so I kind of fell into the career. But as I started doing the work, I found that I engaged most when I was moving from a project to another project, even inside the same corporation, every, call it 9 to 12 months, because that was about as long as I felt I could derive value from doing a new project and could give it a good intensity of focus. And so eventually I happened to the point on wanting to also use this career to serve beyond just doing work to get code. At the time, I was working in the oil industry, and it left a bad taste in my mouth because it was so profit-driven, and it would very happily pull people on and then lay them off. That felt wrong to me. It's not a damnation on the business practice. It makes sense in hindsight, but it didn't sit well. I wanted to do something different. So I found a company that did cardiac monitoring and had software to support that. And I, for the first time, felt like my code was doing something more. But it was because I was attaching it back to that why, that service mentality that I wanted to get to. As I started working there, I realized that yes, I could continue going here, but I was starting to lose steam with the projects, and they really only wanted me to be in a maintenance mode. And so for my life to continue to be vibrant and something I wanted to live, I needed to find somewhere else to work. Not that I didn't love doing the work of helping people, making certain that they didn't have a heart attack at home, but I needed to be engaged in the work in a different way. So I made a choice and started talking to one of my who's a recruiter that I could just talk to, and said, hey, I'm losing engagement here and they want me in the maintenance. Can you help me find something better? And so he talked me through what I needed. And then as I started talking to these companies, I would ask him, hey, what do you know about so-and-so? And when I finally talked to him about improving, he says, everything I have heard about improving is good. Every one of their people are happy to work there, and it seems like a really good fit for the things you're interested in. The only thing I can say is most of the time when I send someone there, they disappear. They don't go back on the market, which I think is pretty good speaking for what you're looking for. Because I wanted to find that company I could be at for a long time, just not be stuck in the same project for 5 years. And that's what I found. Now, with all of this, I want to offer you a small step that you can take today. Literally, as you leave this presentation, you can probably start doing all of these to start investing in those relationships that matter. So, for example, go explore your LinkedIn. Look for 2 people you're connected to who don't know each other but should. And then write a LinkedIn introduction or an email introduction, depending upon their preference. But link them up for a reason that'll be valuable to them. I am working with a BA who I think is fantastic, and I used to work with this product owner, one Wade Pinder, who is awesome. By the way, gives really good talks as well, so if you want to check some of those out, I'll strongly recommend them. But I knew that these 2 didn't know each other, but they were both working in a very similar sphere, and because of the conversations I had had with both of them, I thought both of them would have even more interesting conversations because it would be the work stories they could trade. It would be that pouring back into each other to encourage. And so I wrote a letter of introduction. And to my great surprise, it turns out they knew like all the same people, but had never met each other. And now my BA friend has gotten introduced to a wider professional community that Wade was part of. And Wade has a new interesting person to talk to. He took me up on it faster than I thought because he and I really didn't have a deep, close working relationship, except for several conversations we'd had back and forth at conferences like this one. You'd be surprised how much that little introduction can be made. And by pouring value into your network, you show you're thinking of them in ways that are uncommon nowadays. Think about this. What challenges are you struggling with? Like at work, what thing are you working on that you would really like to have some help in? Maybe you don't know what book to go get and you'd like a recommendation. Or maybe you're trying to figure out about a software suite to go solve a certain problem. Go and look in your connections for someone who might know someone, or even ask them and ask for recommendations like, hey, do you know someone who can help me with this? And that, again, shows you're thinking beyond just the network of being who, but you're now taking that moment and asking for their help. Now, all of us have friends that if they asked us for help, we would, on the drop of a hat, run to go help them. But very often, when it comes to ourselves, we're not good at asking for that help back. I don't know why 100%, except for the fear of looking like you need the help. But I find it in myself too. And so when I did this, I asked specifically for some help I knew I would need for a side project, not something I was 100% in doing for work, but I still needed the help as it felt safe. And the outpouring of help I had was astounding. I think he's the vice president of our organization, offered to spend 30 minutes teaching me a new tool that I was learning just for the side. And then even while I was geeking out about this thing on that meeting, he allowed me to run over 10 extra minutes, which is very valuable, at least as far as I know. He poured this into me selflessly without asking for something back. He just said, yeah, here, let's chat. And I've been able to play with this new tool, I should say, a bunch now. And I think I actually understand it better. He invested in my career, and all I had to do was ask, hey, can you help me figure out one problem? For those who may be in that case, who would you go to if you were to ask for advice after losing a job? Send them a message. Think of like the 10 people you might want to talk to or you think would be encouraging. Send them a message. Share an article you found in Business Weekly or in whatever blogs you follow. and talk to them about those things. Say that you're thinking of them, that you just wanted to talk, and watch how fast your network will start pouring back into you encouragement and help you take that next step on your career journey, whatever it happens to be. For slightly longer term work going forward, I want you to remember the recommendation to focus your career on building it by service. Give back. Find something you do, whatever's in your hands, and start with that. Because remember, idleness doesn't produce fruit. We don't need to sit on our hands. We don't need to recluse. People will value your opinion. What may be completely ordinary to you is going to be extraordinary to someone else. Don't believe me? Think of it like this. If you are a software developer and a mother, and you happen to be a cook, you will naturally have a very particular understanding of what it looks like to multitask. I mean, just from observing my wife when she cooks and the fact that she is constantly juggling 3 beautiful children, I got a lot of respect for the woman. Like, my gosh, she handles it beautifully. But she understands something about setting up a task to get it started and then letting it go and then jumping over this one to take care of something that's currently more important. Now think about that in software. There is, of course, task scheduling, or even just parallel cycling, or even interrupt threads trying to figure out what's the most important thing to figure out to do right now. And she will have a unique experience and understanding of that I can't have because of who she is in life. The same thing happens for you. I bet you if I took 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk with you, I could point out 3 things at least that will create an interesting intersection for what you know and what you know how to do. Focus on the service. Don't focus on you. Focus on how you can deliver value through what you've seen, even if you feel it's like a little foolish because I just figured this out. That moment right after you learned is the perfect moment to teach because you still remember what it was like not to know. For these, consider writing a blog. Give a presentation at one of these wonderful organizations or the user groups who have all gone virtual. Go and volunteer. Give back. Spend your life in ways which will make you happy and benefit those who are around you. Now, I know it's going to take a little bit to get over that initial hump, because every time we take on an endeavor that is uniquely personal or creative or generative, there's always something, some force that wants to resist that delivery. Don't listen to it. It is okay. Don't regret the day of a small beginning. Take that first stumbling step, learn from it, and get better. It is going to be worth your time, and it is definitely worth it to the community to have more of our members talking to each other about what we have learned and how we have learned it, because it may be one day down the line, your experience helps some silly kid like me figure out where they want to go with their career. Because even if there's no one who's going to walk your same path, there's going to be someone right now who's walking a path so similar to yours in the past that they can benefit from what you have to say. Now, taking this, I want to look at what the career growth looks like beyond just the model. There's a concept called shuhari, which talks about the way you build up practice. It talks about first following the rules by rote. Then once you have the rules down by rote, you take the step back and you understand why the rules were written in the way they were and can follow the system with its intent beyond even just the rules. And then you transcend the need for the rules and examine a way to make the system better. One of the critical elements in this practice is that you will come back to that moment to follow it by rote, to begin again, to re-engage with the system as a student, to learn anew the lessons that have been taught to you by time, and to hopefully this time learn them in a new or different way. Applying this to the do, know, and grow, as I took on a position as a team lead and as a lead for others, I realized very seriously that I am still performing at all 3 stages and in very different ways. I still do a little bit of the do of my individual contributor, but I'm also now being valued primarily as do for the leading of others. It is a do value, not a no value. I'm still valued as no by my teammates who come to me and ask questions about why did we do it this way? Why is it done that way? Okay, and so I have to work with it there. And I'm also doing the grow at the same moment, trying to pour into them so that they can become the ones to whom we go for no knowledge. and I'm trying to develop the capacity to do well in my current role, and eventually to develop the knowledge enough that I can share it with others. So as you go through your career, don't be surprised if you've got a smattering of everything. That's okay. The trick I have found is understanding the areas where you are good and the areas where you are a little weaker, and choosing the right one to focus on in a given moment kind of comes down to where you want to grow and where you want to take your career. I very much want to step into leadership. I know that means taking care of people and also managing my time. So I have spent an inordinate amount of time studying in that material, and now I know I'm in there for practice. So now I spend time on how do I look back at what I've done? How do I gain feedback on what I've done? And you see how those steps build on each other towards the overall direction I want to take with my career. So those are what I see as the field beyond. I can't see much more than about 2 or 3 steps, but that's kind of what it's looking to me right now. Come back to me a year from now and I may have a completely different answer, but that's how I see my career develop in the time I started with this concept to now. And I'm expecting as I grow through my career, I'll learn maybe there's a 4th stage, or even that maybe the whole stages model is a little too contrived. But I want you to think about it like that this career isn't a hard and fast thing. It is too tied too deeply to the thing that matters at the end of the day, which is you. You are what matters in the career because it is about your life and how you want to spend a full third or more of it. Because ideally, your career is not merely about what you choose to do, but about the kind of person you want to become. So don't be afraid to look honestly at what you want to be. And dream again about what you want to be when you grow up. And then take the adult learnings and very seriously consider the steps you want to take to get there. And now I'd like to open the floor to questions again.
Thank you, Daniel. What does developing know and do stages at the same time look like?
Okay, so in the do, the focus is on the tools and being able to use them to do the work. In the know, the goal is to know about the use of those tools or about the experience of where they ought to be applied for best results. So do and know at the same time can look a little bit like picking up a book like this, 7 Languages in 7 Days, which is about developing 7 different programming languages, just practicing in them. At the same time, learning where those values, the particular paradigms that those languages support might best fit for problems you're looking at today. There will come with it the chance to start making suggestions from what you know how to do to suggest a better way to do a different feature. And so those kind of develop at the same time because they are rooted in the same knowledge, but applied differently.
Awesome. So we have a pretty long one here. If you need me to repeat it, just let me know. I want to make a transition into management, and I'm taking on leadership responsibilities above my current position. I've gotten positive feedback from my managers about moving up, but I've been constantly passed up for those roles without any reason. What should I do to make sure I get promoted?
Okay, so first, I will tell you honestly, I can't tell you what you need to do to get promoted. However, I can give you some ways that you can start learning that thing that may be missing. For me, I know I tend to have a pretty abrasive personality. I'm very straightforward when it comes to certain things. And that held me back for a long time from really getting into the position where I thought I could deliver the most value. And what I learned I had to do is I had to actually be honest enough to ask for the painful feedback. I had to cultivate relationships with the people who were above me and honestly next to me or below me, that someone could call me when I was being stupid or being I'm not going to use the word, but you understand my point. And cultivating those relationships to enable you to see those blind spots that you can't see in the mirror. And then having the courage to go through what it takes to improve on that. I'm not saying you need to rewrite yourself, but you do need to take a hard look at why you may be being passed up. It may be you don't have the right experience for the role. It might be that the role you want to take isn't one you should take in this company because there's not a culture fit, or maybe it's going by some seniority thing. That's a choice that's very deeply personal. But if you want to get promoted, make certain you can have an open and honest conversation about the people who make that decision with the people who make that decision about why you didn't make. And if they can't offer you really good answers, start asking the people below you in ways that they won't feel like they have to answer yes, sir, to. So develop the relationships around you and start being curious. That's the best answer I can give for why you may not be getting there, but get you the answer that may get you to the next step.
Awesome. Thank you. So for our last question, what's in your hands? How do you know what's in your hands is good enough or how to use it?
Okay. So this is one of the harder pieces that can come and take time because it really deals a lot with that internal narrative we have about, is what I have to say worth what I'm going to do? What's in your hands? Almost always it comes down to what your particular life experience has been, how you've gotten here, the kind of mental models you use to talk about that. Best way I can find for describing and discovering it is sit down and talk to yourself. Write a journal. Talk to yourself about what you're experiencing, about the way you think about your work, and why it was so easy for you to solve this problem and so hard to solve that one. As you get to the question about good enough, I can give you the blanket answer. It is. It's not good enough to go and do, conquer the world, but it's good enough to get started. As long as you don't aim beyond getting started and learning what the next step should be, it's good enough. Go and take that first step. Go figure out what it is that you want and build up to that. How to use it depends very heavily on what it is. But almost always, you can produce some kind of a knowledge sharing product. And the first step for how to use it is have other people look at it. Don't hide it. Don't put it under a rock. Be willing to put it out there. For me, that started with this internal blog to the the employer I was working with. And I would share it with my teammates. It's like, hey guys, read this. Does this make sense? And I'd get feedback. And then I'd get better at it. Eventually that turned into an actual blog that I've been writing weekly-ish, I want to say, for years now. And it's just a matter of practice. Don't be afraid to share who you are and what you're writing with others and get that feedback to build it up into the tool that people will be beating down the door to say, I've got to have it.
Awesome. Thank you all for attending today's session. And Daniel, thank you for sharing.
Sure thing. Before we go, I did want to take a quick moment. I do want to give back to the community as much as I can. As I mentioned, there is the book giveaway. The first 5 attendees who email me at daniel@scheifler.io with the subject line of Own Your Career Techfest 2020 was awesome. And send in the body, tell me what your biggest takeaway from this presentation was. I want to have the feedback so I can improve it. And then we'll talk and get the details so I can send you a copy of this very valuable book. And again, send me first 5 people whose emails I can get. I'm happy to get this to you. Of course, there's the Amazon ship time to get it to you, but it will happen. Now, if you care for a little bit more, I encourage you to check out my blog at daniel.scheifler.io, or just shoot me a general question. No required subject line and secret code. Just at daniel@scheifler.io. I'm happy to talk and to offer any advice I can. Thank you for taking the time.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That wraps up our presentation for today. The recording of this session will be available at HoustonTechFest.com soon, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual Houston Tech Fest. Have a great day.